Tonight on Review, the Cultural Week in cinema, books, theatre and music. Cultures clash in King's Cross.
If anyone comes after my son, I'll kill them!
Juliette Binoche and Jude Law star in Anthony Minghella latest. Has Stephen King written his first truly literary novel? 30-somethings remember the time of their lives with a stage version of Dirty Dancing. Yusuf Islam takes a spiritual note in his first album for 28 years.
The moment you walked inside my door, I knew that I need not look no more.
And Forward Prize-winning poet Robin Robertson reads for us in the studio. And joining me are broadcaster and critic Paul Morley, MP Michael Gove, journalist and novelist Stephanie Merritt, and musician Aki Nawaz. A crime can cause a repair, a break can fix something. That's how Anthony Minghella describes the theme of his new film Breaking and Entering. It's the first he's written himself since Truly Madly Deeply. This too is set in London, in King's Cross, where modern gentrifiers clash with the poorest of refugees. Jude Law, who's worked with Minghella in Cold Mountain, the talented Mr. Ripley, plays an architect trapped in an unhappy relationship. He becomes drawn towards the darker side of King's Cross and a Bosnian mother, Juliette Binoche. It all begins with the burglary of his new office.
They downloaded my personal photographs off my laptop that they stole the first time, and they brought it back.
Oh, can we see it?
Yeah.
Lovely. So they got compassion.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I'm not saying you got to show them compassion. You know, you're just like my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. They're the criminals. They're the bad guys. Can I have a go? If me and Sandy here break the law, you know, we're going to get a decent lawyer. Now, these guys are broke in here. They go straight to jail. Do not pass go. One law for us, one for them.
Except we haven't broken the law.
Everyone's broke the law.
So, Michael, we see there the two worlds colliding, the liberal architect, the liberal cop coming into contact with the underworld. Did it feel to you like a very modern story?
No, it felt ever so slightly dated. I mean, it felt in a way like someone who hadn't got out of their anti-Thatcher reflexes, which they'd learned in the 1980s. It was very much a film that encompassed not just the scenery of a particular part of North London, but the mindset of a particular part of North London. Because for me, unfortunately, the film contained a parade of cliches. The young criminal, the Bosnian criminal, is someone who has a secret talent. It's not sufficient for him simply to be the villain. We have to discover how he can be redeemed. It's the case that the cop whom we see there, who is presented as the moral centre of the film, is in fact a moral relativist. He's the one who tries to argue that, in fact, the villain is as much a victim as any of the other protagonists. And also, when we actually do need to find villains in this thing, then I'm afraid the hoariest old Hollywood cliché of the moment is brought back. The only real villains in this film are the Serbs, and it's, of course, the Muslim Bosnians who are the hero and the heroine of this particular picture. So in that respect, I was dreadfully disappointed that what should have been quite an exciting engagement with what's happening in London at the moment felt as though it were made 8, 10, 15 years ago.
Stephanie, did you find it as cliched?
No, I don't think that it is so much a film about the clash of cultures or the clash about two different classes of Londoners. I think at its heart, it's a film about loneliness and isolation, which you could say is the sort of, you know, the most commonplace urban malaise. And all of these characters, whether they are very affluent and apparently involved in a happy family, or whether they are refugees, they are all isolated in their own way, and they're all desperately trying to find a connection with another person.
And those kind of themes, quite a departure for Minghella.
I don't know, actually. I mean, it's interesting that he's gone away into Hollywood, and I was prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt when he made his Hollywood movies, that there was a kind of kitsch element to them that you kind of could put up with as a sort of accidental entertainment. Certainly now that he's gone back to London, and certainly now he's gone back to writing his own script, it's absolutely excruciating. I mean, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's not only coming from the 80s, it's also coming from a kind of television. It's kind of a weird cross between a soap and a really bad Hampstead novel. And as a London movie, I think it ranks somewhere below the Spice Girls movie. Dreadful sort of representation of London in some kind of vacuum, as if he's absolutely scared stiff of going anywhere near it.
Did you? Oh, well, I thought that this actually gives quite a... you know, it's quite an antidote to the way London is portrayed by the likes of Richard Curtis and now Woody Allen. You're actually seeing a part of London that is in transition, and the whole, you know, it's a fairly heavy-handed metaphor.
It is a part of London, though, that is always used on any Commoner Garden TV cop show. That estate, I'm sick to death of seeing that estate.
Yeah, but I think, I thought it was a great film, probably because I could associate with some of the stuff that Michael's talking about being immigrants and how, you know, how society kind of sees you, the middle class and things like this. And Myro, the thief, I could identify with perfectly, remind me of my childhood. Well, and but I thought it was great. There were so many stories, and the most important thing was the mothers were so passionate about their children.
Well, we can see that now in a scene between Juliette Binoche and Rafi Gavron as her son.
Where do you go? Where do you go every day?
I'm working. I'm earning money.
You have to go to school. That's what we promised. With police in the court. Otherwise, they'll put you in prison.
I'll be 16 in 3 months.
Mirsade. You clever boy.
I have to go. I'm late.
If one of his family, if any of our people are leaving you, I'm telling you, if any one of them is, I'll kill them. And I wouldn't care.
Do you think this was a convincing depiction of refugee life, then?
I think certain aspects of it. There was one thing which I kind of particularly found offensive, and that's that when immigrants come here, they're only, you know, down to stereotypical images of being either prostitutes, thieving, and they can only clean your streets. And, you know, we have this in British society where people go, oh, you know, what's going to happen if we let the immigrants go? Who's going to clean our streets? It's almost like, oh, people are only worthy of cleaning our streets, which is really disgusting.
Exactly, and I felt, in that respect, aesthetically, it was behind the curve. It was like sort of Dirty Pretty Things, as though the underworld is inhabited entirely by New Britons. And I thought one of the most cliched aspects of it was the scene where Juliette Binoche is with other Bosnian emigres, and she's surrounded by various headscarf women, and they're all singing folk songs and all the rest of it. And I just thought that it wasn't true to the experience that we've had in the last 5 years of immigrants coming to Britain. It was almost as though we were just sort of replaying cliches.
I think it reflects British society and its intolerance to just accepting a lot of different colours.
But there's
what about
who's at all intolerant.
But what about the different threads that are woven through it? The film's called Breaking and Entering. We see Liv, the woman in the broken partnership, trying to mend a plate. It's metaphor heavy.
Oh my God, yes. To the extent that every day I would just drop my head with some of the cliches and the whispered, you know, conversations about, are you happy, or, you know, what are you thinking? And when the relationship cracks up, the plates are pieced together. Juliette Binoche is a tailor, and at the end, you know, Jude Law, who has to speak some appalling lines. You know, it's so wonderful that everything's been mended. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And never remember, breaking can be good, like breaking habits. Well, Breaking and Entering, which had its first showing at the London Film Festival this week, goes on general release on November 10th to Certificate 15. Stephen King's new novel begins gently enough. The widow of a writer is rummaging through his papers, remembering their past life together. It's not until 50 pages in that someone's whacked across the face with a shovel. Lisey's story is the best-selling author's most personal novel yet, seen as a tribute to his own wife of 35 years, Tabitha. It's also been billed as his most ambitious and literary work to date. Stephen King's written more than 40 books, all of them worldwide bestsellers, and many of them huge screen successes too. Lisey Landon is drawn into the dark world of her husband Scott's childhood abuse, a fantasy realm of supernatural horror haunted by the Long Boy monster.
Now it had marked her as well, made her a part of its never-ending moment, its terrible world-spanning regard. From now on, she would have to be careful, especially if she happened to wake up in the middle of the night. And Lisey had an idea that her nights of sound sleep were over. In the small hours, she would have to steer her gaze away from mirrors and window glass, and especially from the curved surfaces of water glasses, God knew why. She would have to protect herself as well as she could, if she survived this night. It's very close, honey. Scott had whispered as he lay shivering on the hot pavement. Very close.
We're thinking about setting up a sideline in horror film production. Now, Stephanie, this was billed as Stephen King's first truly literary novel. Do you think he does manage to pull it off?
No, not in the slightest. He desperately wants to. I couldn't help being reminded of the comedy character Garth Marenghi, who's a spoof horror writer very much in the mould of Stephen King, who always had this great line when he was interviewed. He would say, I'm the only man I know who's written more books than I've read. And I feel that this feels very much like Stephen King's slightly anxious attempt to persuade us that that isn't true of him. It's pebble-dashed with literary references all the way through. There's epigraphs from D.H. Lawrence and allusions to Shakespeare, and then, just in case we've missed them, he provides a list of them at the end in his author's note to point out every time he made a reference to a work of literature. And it does feel like this central character, it's a sort of fantasy self-portrait.
And he attempts not just in terms of quoting the books, but he attempts different literary styles too. I mean, one American critic said the stream of consciousness was even Joycean.
Well, King would hope, and presumably he'd had a word with that critic, because it is very much about King demonstrating that he's in love with language. And absolutely the character in there has this wonderful combination of being, you know, popular, talented and critically acclaimed. And the fact that it's called, I mean, even from the very fact that you have trouble reading her name, from the not even from the first sentence, from the first...
Lisey's.
You know, the title, you have trouble with King's prose, Lisey's. And the fact that it said it's Lisey's story, but of course in a way it isn't. It's really ultimately Scott's story. I mean, and the problem I have with Stephen King always is that every sentence, and this goes from the absolute beginning, his prose is extraordinarily difficult to read. Now, if he grabs you as a story, one of the problems is his self-consciousness about displaying his writing. His self-consciousness about displaying it through the character Scott means that Scott in his entire life never seemed to speak an ordinary sentence.
So did you find the same kind of tension between the plot and then the overwritten literary style?
Yeah, I was getting really bored for the first 50 or 60 pages, just trying to say, where's the story, where's the story? And she's so obsessed by him, and it's almost like I thought it's his story, how he wants to be remembered when he dies, because he did have an accident. And,
yeah, the car accident, yeah, Stephen King did, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen King did, he had a car accident, and it was almost like how he wants to be remembered. People say, well, you know, where did he get his ideas from? And then they want this kind of fantasy planet of Booyah Moon. You know, that's where Stephen King was thinking from. But after about 50 or 60 pages, he actually did grab me when all the violence came in.
See, this is the creepy thing about him, though, isn't it?
How about you? Yeah, the horror bits where, I mean, it's full of every trick in the book, isn't it? She jumps because she sees a strange man coming into her house. In fact, it's a vacuum cleaner. I mean, I did jump, but even so, it's slightly cheap, isn't it?
The whole thing's cheap. This is one of the worst books I've ever read in my life, if not the worst. I found it almost impossible to finish. Everything about this book is repellent. The prose is unreadable. Just give me one example. This is a description of Scott being attacked. The Pulitzer Prize winner, the enfant terrible, who published his first novel at the tender age of 22, goes down. Scott Landon hits the deck, as the saying is. It's difficult to know where to begin in trying to point out that in this clotted mass of cliché, there is a sentence which could be rendered in only 2 words. Beyond that, the novel is just ethically repellent as well, in the way in which it tries to take advantage of self-harm, of child abuse, and tries to make out of that material something entertaining and compelling. And also its whole treatment of Lisey, of the wife, I find intensely patronising.
I can't believe this is being presented as a tribute to his wife, because all the way through you get these constant reminders that she's not nearly as clever as he is. You know, you get a list of all the books that Scott likes to read, which are Pynchon and Borges and De Lillo, and then she gets to read Shirley Conran, and he's always pointing out that she's a little bit dim.
And what do you think he was doing with the supernatural? There is this weird realm, Booyah Moon, there's the long boy monster.
I think he's still got to appeal to his readers, and there is a sense he's tossing that off, you know, fairly perfunctorily, this ridiculous metaphysical spa almost, where you can go over and heal yourself. And I got the feeling he feels he has to do that, or he will lose his natural-born readership who are waiting for that.
And he did keep making up these little words. After a while, them words were just...
And they're so cutesy.
Yeah.
They're so cutesy.
They're just getting really stupid.
Kind of down
actually, it's like
home,
Michael said, I actually agree with him. I'm glad he didn't like it, because, to be honest, I didn't like it.
But it's like he will never get these mythical readers. He will never write that book. But he's absolutely bored with his readers, which is extraordinary, because they are the readers that have given him this position where he can even begin to experiment in this way.
Did you feel the same?
Oh yeah, I hated it. I mean, I just think all the, as Michael pointed out with that sentence, but all the dialogue as well. All the characters speak in these terrible sort of folksy, down-home platitudes or baby talk, and so you can't ever get a sense of who any of these people are because they just say things like "a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do," and that's one of the more finely crafted sentences in the book.
Well, I think a certain amount of unanimity there. Lucy's story is published by Hodder and Stoughton, and Mark Lawson interviews Stephen King for Newsnight in early November. And now look at the week in culture. The rock star's guide to the universe. Brian May, who studied astronomy at university, this week launched his book Bang, written with Patrick Moore and astrophysicist Chris Lintott.
Astronomy is the part of science which really does try to tell you your context in the universe. And to me, that's a burning question. It's not really possible to answer any of these questions, I have to say, but astronomers are getting close to putting a whole picture together, and that's why we decided to write the book. And it's a fairly brave attempt, I think, in a way, to tell the story of the universe in a completely linear fashion.
The highly respected actor and director Peter Barkworth died this week, aged 77. He was best known for television work like Telford's Change and The Power Game, and his one-man show on Siegfried Sassoon was also very well received.
"He's a cheery old card," grunted Harry to Jack, as they slogged up to Arras with rifle and pack. But he did for them both by his plan of attack.
But as a drama teacher, he inspired a whole generation at RADA.
He had this great gentleness about him. He was a very sort of open teacher. He treated you really like a fellow professional, even though you were just a student. He had there's a great deal of affection for him in the Academy.
It's known as Star Wars for Girls. The massive 80s film hit Dirty Dancing arrived on the London stage this week and broke all advanced box office records, selling £12 million worth of tickets to 30-somethings keen to rekindle the romance of their youth. It's been adapted for stage by Eleanor Bergstein, who wrote the original film starring Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey. Now the ingenue baby is played by Georgina Rich, literally swept off her feet by Johnny, the pelvis-thrusting dance instructor. Joseph Brown, who created the stage role in Australia, plays the master of the mambo. Now, Aki, when you went to Dirty Dancing, did you have to go incognito?
I was questioning my integrity, my self-elected integrity and credibility, and I walked in and for a while I always wanted to be John Travolta before I became a punk rocker, so I thought I'd watch this, and for about 5 or 10 seconds I was all right, and then afterwards it was just downhill, and the dancing there was no dirty dancing, it was just dancing, not really good rhythm, or I've seen some great dancing, South African and all this, and I just wasn't impressed by the acting as well, and the kind of artificial American accents, which just didn't make it real. And the whole intention was to try to bring that 1963 in front of you live, and it just didn't happen.
Now, Stephanie, I'm going to betray you here because I happen to know you are a big fan of the Dirty Dancing movie,
I love
as I think most of the audience were. How did it compare?
Well, I had the time of my life. It was
boom, boom. Baby came out of her corner.
It was. I mean, all of the things you said are true, but I think you have to accept that that's what you're going to get. I mean, the film itself was never an exercise in gritty realism anyway, but this has made it absolutely kind of Disneyfied and two-dimensional. But I think if you accept that that's what you're going to get, there is some, it looks very much like a West End show, and there isn't a great deal of acting because the cast are mainly dancers, so it does feel very kind of cartoonish in that respect. And everything is a dance routine, even the changes of scenery and laying the tables, and but it's very slick, and it's a great kind of feel-good night out. It's really good fun.
Michael, you're not exactly the target audience.
I'm certainly not the target audience, and one of the things that I felt when I went in there is I felt completely alien. It was a bit like going into an Anglican church if you've never been in there before, or a Greek Orthodox church. You're confronted with a liturgy with which you're unfamiliar, but everyone else around you knows it.
I think only you could make that comparison.
But because I was struck by the fact that there were certain lines that provoked a reaction, and everyone in the audience was repeating them. Obviously, classic lines from the film of which I was completely unaware. So in that respect, I'm sort of a perfect test case because I was uncontaminated by contact with the film or anything about it before I went in. It's perfectly straightforward. It's quite enjoyable. Unlike the best musicals, there are no numbers that you go out humming or singing. But I thought the dancing was
I think
okay.
the best bit was where the tree trunk came down. I just hope there was loads of dancers underneath it, but it wasn't, you know.
But Paul, in a way, to me, the audience seemed to be enjoying how the staging was coping with the most difficult bits of the film.
Like the tree.
The tree coming down.
The tree got a sigh. A sort of pre-orgasmic sigh. And of course, the whole thing is about an orgasm. The whole thing is about the bloody song at the end and everybody coming on. Stephen King would say it's schmucking awful. But the point is, what's fascinating about it is what it is, the phenomenon, and the idea that the encroachment of nostalgia, as certain generations reach their nostalgic periods, which I think is constantly taking us by surprise, because every generation, you think that's the end of nostalgia, we're not going to look in it back anymore. Here's a whole new generation with their nostalgic piece. It's nostalgic for something that is itself nostalgic. It's a complete kind of mix together of periods and styles and music, and it's a fairy story. It's a fairy tale.
But it is a fairy story, isn't it? It's the archetypal female fantasy,
Well,
isn't it? The plain, swotty girl gets taken up by the sexy man.
It's the enduring, it's the story of every classic romance written by a woman. It's Jane Eyre. It's Bridget Jones, if you like. It's the plain girl wins the beautiful troubled man over the more obvious beauty because.
But didn't you feel, though, that ultimately, because these people there were determined to have a good time, they've spent their money to have a good time, the fact it's done with such meagre efficiency is really sad, ultimately, because the moments of great transcendent, to really lift this up into a great tragedy, to treat it seriously. It was like watching...
people say, it's really successful. Well, so is McDonald's, but it don't mean it's good food.
It was also like watching Strictly Come Dancing without the moderation of Bruce and without Craig, Hallwood or whatever he's called, and Len Goodman. It was solid dancing, but really mediocre X Factor level just about.
And it did have, as Aki said, it missed that. It didn't have the original film wasn't particularly dirty, the dancing, but it did have this sort of Latin... rhythms which had all been transformed into kind of West End show numbers.
Saturday Night Fever was a great milestone.
Enough with your John Travolta.
I love
so there you go, Dirty Dancing, like Jane Eyre and a Church of England liturgy. It continues at the Aldwych Theatre in London. And let's stay with memories of a teenage girl's bedroom. Joss sticks, paper flowers, Cat Stevens on the record player, but enough autobiography. The 70s singer of hits like Morning Has Broken and Moonshadow has just released his first album for 28 years after famously becoming a Muslim. Yusuf Islam has spent the last 3 decades doing charity work, including setting up an Islamic primary school. His new single is called Heaven, Where True Love Goes.
The moment you said I will, I knew that this love was real and that my fate was sealed. Oh, heaven must have programmed you. The moment I looked into your eyes, I knew that they told no lies. There would be no goodbyes. Oh, 'cause heaven must have programmed you. Oh, I go where true love goes. I go where true love goes. I go where true love goes. I go where true love goes.
28 years on, Paul, do you think his style has changed very much?
No, I mean, what's interesting, I suppose, is that, he's treated with disdain the idea of being an Islamic singer. And now that he's made music as an Islam, he's made music using percussion, because he was taking very extreme the idea there were certain instruments you couldn't kind of touch. But now that he's finally made an album of songs, what's fascinating, and I have a theory about why this might be so, is that in pop culture in general, there was obviously a big return of the singer-songwriter, and people very much influenced by Cat Stevens, and now, the James Blunts, the James Morrisons, even the Didos, and the guy that produced Dido has produced this. And there is a sense where you could, whatever else has happened in his life, when he retired from business, so to speak, in 1978, obviously because of punk rock, the singer-songwriter was over, and you never thought that it would ever come back. There is something about his ego somewhere buried in all that looking around and seeing the return of the singer-songwriter, he's thought, oh, hang on a minute, I would like a bit of that. Maybe, east to west, west to east, to bring back some of the beauty of music that he believes in. What's interesting about this is that it is actually a Cat Stevens album he could have made in 1979 quite easily, and it captures all the Cat Stevens
And again, in the true tradition of the singer-songwriter, he has kept the production very simple.
Well, he's kept it very simple. I mean, I'm quite disappointed in the backing tracks. It just reminds me of like really bad pub music. so all I had to go on was his lyrics, and I think I kind of understand what he's trying to do, and he's trying to build. You know, he's a really nice guy, and he's trying to build a lot of bridges with all the current conflicts that are going on. He's trying to do that. I mean, for me, I would have preferred if he would have kind of pushed the boat out like I do every time and get in trouble. I would have preferred him to push that out, because I think a lot of people want him to deal with some subjects because they feel that he's a bridge. You know, he makes bridges. I burn bridges, but he makes them, and I think that he hasn't quite achieved it.
I suppose we're used to Cat Stevens songs, and some of them did have a religious theme. Morning Has Broken was a hymn. What do you think about some of the religious ideas in this, even if it's understated, as we're saying?
I actually found it, I didn't find it understated at all. I found it a bit relentless. I found it a lot like being poked repeatedly in the chest by a particularly determined street preacher to music.
Really?
The one, there's one song in the middle where it's just there's this incredibly sort of blunt message that you know somebody's watching everything you do and you're going to die, and if you don't believe, then you know it's all over for you, and it's all a bit sort of, you know. But then I
think he's still in his kind of hippie side.
It's still the flower power.
It's still flower power to him, and I didn't find it. You know, I was really looking for some kind of anger or you know, and he just didn't have it all. And I think his intention is to kind of reach out to a lot of probably over 40s and 50s.
The gentleman.
Yeah.
In musical terms, Michael, do you think it was a good idea for him to have a comeback?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. I felt rather sad, actually, listening to it, because I felt it was a bit like having seen a footballer retire at the top of his game, then coming back 10 or 15 years later, and everything is just flaccid and out of place. In that respect, you know, it's the musical equivalent of Gaza still playing for a Chinese team at the age of 39. You know, you can see flashes of the original greatness and genius, but I'm afraid it's all really rather
But the tone
flat.
of his voice, is still
and the melodies.
There are melodies. Exactly, there are moments there when you can see
I think you've gone a bit extreme. I think he's gone into management, and I think he's really good as a coach. I think he's, you know. So I don't agree with that, actually. I mean, I think what he's done, his melody's still there, his voice is still there, and it's an incredibly brave thing that he's done.
I felt that the lyrics were banal, and I felt that there was nothing original about this. There was, in a sense, he was replaying and trying to capture some of the manoeuvre, some of the noise that we associate with him in the past, but it had a tinny echo now.
He travels around the world. He's got access.
Second hand.
Oddly enough, that now fits into the contemporary music world.
Yeah, he travels around the world. He's got access to great musicians. I think there's one track on there where he's got some kind of Arabic singer or some African.
Would you like to have seen more of that?
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the most appealing song on the album.
It is surprising there isn't much more of that, actually. He's kept, as I was saying, like a follow-up to where he was.
To where he was. And say he tried to do something more out there, as you were suggesting. Wouldn't we be mocking him as some kind of equivalent of Disco Dad, trying to get down with the youth, and he'd just seem absurd as a middle-aged man?
Well, as far as young Muslim youth are concerned, I think that they would have preferred him to do that, just to kind of show, you know, their side of the story, and a lot of people do still reach out to him, and he does tremendous work, you know.
I think his job was more to get to the West. You know, to be the friend, to be the gentleman, to say it's okay.
He's exactly.
Yeah.
OK, well, Another Cup is released by Polydor Records on November the 13th, and the first single is available for download from Monday. Thanks to my guests, Michael Gove, Aki Nawaz, Paul Morley and Stephanie Merritt. For more details and useful links for both programmes, do go to our website. Kirsty will be back next Friday at 11, and Jeremy will be back with Newsnight on Monday.